China's space ambitions have taken a significant hit in the past month, with the Long March rockets facing a series of setbacks. Back in June, debris from one of the rockets fell near a village, causing widespread panic. Less than 10 years later, during a test, a rocket suddenly lost control, shot into the sky, and crashed near the outskirts of a city. Such basic errors haven't been seen in years. To make things worse, the Long March 6A rocket has broken apart in space 3 times this year. The most recent incident was on August 6, right after the rocket had successfully placed 18 satellites from the Tianfan constellation into orbit. Minutes later, the second stage booster of the Long March 6A disintegrated in orbit. Within 3 days, nearly 1,000 pieces of debris were scattered across space. It's important to note that the Tianfan constellation was meant to rival Elon Musk's Starlink in orbit, as part of the CCP's preparation for future unmanned warfare against the US. But now, before even having the chance to compete with their adversary, China has already damaged its own assets. These fragments are floating about 500 to 600 miles from Earth and won't re-enter the atmosphere to burn up for decades. Even a piece just 10 centimeters in size would pierce the protective layer of the International Space Station. Larger pieces could potentially destroy an entire spacecraft. If this kind of incident happens again, the orbital path of the Tianfan constellation could become unusable. Applying for new orbits would be very difficult. This debris could also interfere with the US's KH-12 reconnaissance satellites, which orbit over the Russia-Ukraine region, and may overlap with this debris. The US Space Command is now closely monitoring the situation. The Long March 6A rocket was developed by the 8th Academy of the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, which is also known as the Shanghai Academy of Spaceflight Technology. The in-orbit explosion of the second stage is considered a serious technical failure. However, the problem may go beyond just technical issues. Under Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign, a 30-person investigation team arrived at the 8th Academy in late February. Shortly after, several top leaders were removed from their positions. This included Zhang, a vice president of the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation; Wang, the secretary and deputy director of the 8th Academy; another Zhang, a deputy director, as well as former heads of the Research Division 3 and the Scientific Research Department. At the same time, another deputy director, He, and a director with the same last name are also under close scrutiny by the investigation team, which is deciding whether to dig deeper into their activities. It is said that after being questioned, a deputy director from one research institute revealed information about more than 30 colleagues. The entire academy is now filled with a sense of fear and uncertainty. To avoid a complete collapse, only one deputy director remained in charge of daily operations, while most of all other leaders have been purged. Rumors suggest that director of the academy, Shun Gang, who has close ties to former defense minister Li Shangfu, is also under investigation and may not escape further punishment. Things are even worse because some of the experts who were supposed to be rehired have been poached by private aerospace companies. High-level PhD holders and skilled technicians from various research teams have also been lured away. This talent loss has almost brought the 8th Academy to a standstill, and the Long March rocket continues to experience failures. This year's anti-corruption campaign, which began after the Chinese New Year, has swept through key sectors such as the Central Military Commission, the Army, Defense, Aviation, Aerospace, state-owned enterprises, and the military-industrial complex. Nearly every military enterprise, group, company, and publicly listed company has been affected. The factions of 2 successive defense ministers, as well as certain disobedient princeling systems, have been thoroughly purged. Former Defense Minister Li Shangfu's faction once controlled the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, but it became a primary target during this anti-corruption sweep. Senior officials responsible for scientific approvals within the company were secretly executed by the Central Military Commission investigation team, though the official story is that they committed suicide. Beijing's Aerospace Science and Technology 5th Academy witnessed similar executions, even though one of the individual's wives was a senior expert at Xiehe Hospital. Neither colleagues nor family members of those executed were ever informed of the real reasons for their death, which are classified as state secrets. China's aerospace industry was already lagging behind international standards. After almost a year of Xi Jinping's purge, it's showing clear signs of decline. In the past 6 months, videos of rocket crashing have gone viral, leading many in China to realize that much of the aerospace propaganda may have been computer generated, and the reality is far less advanced than what was advertised. Xi's large-scale crackdown can be traced back to a major military briefing and countermeasures drill organized by the CCP last year. During a rehearsal in Huludao City, Liaoning Province, a missile test encountered serious issues. After a small warship was hit, it took over 4 hours to sink, raising concerns about the missile's effectiveness. This incident highlighted a weakness in the missile's destructive power. Following this, the top leadership initiated reforms in the military and the defense industry, focusing on investigations and restructuring efforts. China's Ministry of Aerospace, several satellites launch bases, the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, and the China Aerospace Science and Industrial Corporation, although civilian organizations are closely linked to the rocket force, with personnel frequently crossing over. These organizations became primary targets during the crackdown and didn't escape unscathed. Initially, this purge was set to end on September 30th, but it has since escalated and been extended until the end of the year. Whether it will actually conclude by then remains uncertain. Now, let's revisit an incident from 2 years ago that exposed a major vulnerability in the CCP's rocket force. It happened at Northwestern Polytechnical University in Xi'an, which is touted as CCP's secret base for aerospace research. In 2022, the CCP released a report revealing that the secret base had been the target for long-term cyber espionage, which went undetected until last minute. This shook the CCP leadership, leading to even more aggressive reforms. The incident began when a technician at one of the rocket engine laboratories at Northwestern Polytechnical University noticed that the system's back-end code had been altered. At first, he thought a colleague had tampered with it and didn't think much of it, but when the code was changed again shortly after, he panicked and reported to his superiors. The lab, recognizing the seriousness, called in the top cyber unit from Shanghai, known for being the best in the country. Upon investigation, they found an even bigger problem. Specific ports in the systems were automatically opening at certain times, allowing hackers to infiltrate the system. Not only had they altered the code, but they had also managed to bypass all network security measures undetected. Further investigation revealed that not only had Northwestern Polytechnical had been hacked, but all the rocket force missiles base connected to the lab were compromised as well. Even more ironic, the hackers had fixed a few bugs in the CCP's code. It's important to note that this laboratory is a core department of the rocket force, specializing in the research and development of advanced missile systems such as the DF-27, DF-17, and the Chang'e rocket-boosted torpedo missile. These projects utilize some of the CCP's most advanced rocket engine technology. The entire system has now been breached by hackers who even fixed some of the code. What's even more absurd is that the elite cyber team from the General Staff Department couldn't figure out how to fix the problem. So they simulated what the altered code could do. They discovered that the hackers had changed the missile launch coordinates. Once a target was input, the system would reverse to coordinates to launch the missile back at the originator. If she had been given a launch order, the missile would have come straight to him. This realization shook the team. They couldn't believe that if it weren't for the technician's discovery, she could have been blown up by his own forces. This incident was tightly covered up within the rocket force. No one dared to report it to Xi. However, Xi had internal informants and eventually found out. He summoned the top rocket force leaders and scouted them severely. Ironically, after investigating substantially on missile development, they almost created a self-destruct system. But how did the hackers infiltrate the system? The missile bases and laboratories are physically isolated from the internet. They aren't connected at all. Plus, the computers they are using aren't foreign brands like IBM, Dell, or HP. They're all Chinese-made, like Inspur servers. After a deeper investigation, it was discovered that the problem was in the missile's chip, which had been secretly acquired from the United States. To keep it hidden, the CCP used a private company in Dongguan to quietly purchase its chips from Taiwan. The whole operation was carried out with great secrecy. But no one expected the chip to have a major flaw. It had two layers of communication protocols. The first layer was what the Chinese military could see, but underneath was a second hidden layer. Their technicians couldn't access or detect the deeper protocols. The issue only came to light when the software activated it. This hidden layer had a backdoor, which was actually a spy program equipped with AI. It could invade the systems directly. Before this, the Chinese military had inspected the chips and declared them clean because they couldn't detect the deeper layer. Not realizing the danger, they installed the chips in the missiles. Apparently, this code could not only change a missile's path, it could even trigger a self-destruct sequence. When Xi Jinping learned about this, he was terrified. He immediately ordered all US-made chips to be removed from the missiles. As for replacements, that would be dealt with later. Last year, the rocket force spent all this time dismantling these chips. Another incident further troubled the Chinese military. They had planned to test the Chang'e torpedo missile on September 10th using the 417 submarine, a Type 093 nuclear sub. The missile is designed to launch from the submarine, cruise above the water, lock onto its target, and then dive back underwater to strike enemy submarines. But tragedy struck on August 21st. All 55 crew members aboard the submarine suffocated, and the test was completely called off. The US then held a military exercise on September 15th, right where the 714 submarine had run into trouble. The message was clear: we know you planned to test on September 10th, but you failed, and we're fully aware of it. It was a direct humiliation to the Chinese military. This sent shockwaves through the CCP. They began to suspect that not only had missiles instructions been tampered with, but the entire data and plans for the DF missiles and Chang'e torpedoes might have been stolen by the US. After analysis, the Central Military Commission concluded that 60 years of work on the missile program might have been wasted. When Xi Jinping heard this, he was crushed. During a commission meeting, he lashed out at everyone from the top down. Finally, he angrily declared, "No more illusions, we must make our own chips." The situation is deeply ironic. After years of effort and massive financial investment, the missiles not only nearly became tools for self-destruction, but their secrets were also completely exposed to the enemy. The PLA's performance was severely compromised. Compared to this, the problems in China's aerospace sector seems insignificant. The failures of the Chinese rocket force have been frequent this year. In July, during a multiple wave missile test in Inner Mongolia, Taiwan somehow knew about this in advance. The secret base in Inner Mongolia's Alxa region was meant to target US aircraft carriers bases and F-22 fighter jets with AI-guided missiles. Yet American radar and satellite systems in Taiwan covered a range of 2,000 kilometers. Not only did Taiwan know about the missile test ahead of time, but they even reported it publicly. This shows that Taiwan's intelligence services have cleared out any CCP infiltration and now have reliable ground information. Taiwan's decision to make this information public also sends a message that the US and Taiwan are fully prepared. They're telling Xi Jinping what you consider top secret is not secret at all. The US and Taiwan already know everything. From an intelligence standpoint, this incident is just as serious, if not worse, than the earlier rocket force scandals. It revealed significant security weaknesses within China's rocket force. On another front, the frequent rocket launch accidents at the Wenchang Space Launch Site in Hainan also highlights China's lack of safety management and quality control in its space program. Visitors to Wenchang often witness thrilling rocket launches, but few know about the tragedies hidden behind the spectacle. In the coconut grove surrounding the launch site lies a hidden graveyard. The tombstones show the faces of young men and women, mostly in their 20s and 30s, likely victims of the frequent rocket explosions. Yet this launch center has only been in operation for less than a decade. The accident rate is shockingly high. What's even more worrying is that many launch missiles still use the highly toxic fuel unsymmetrical electrical dimethylhydrazine. This extremely dangerous substance causes pollution that can last for hundreds of years, posing a serious health risk to nearby residents. Yet, the CCP turns a blind eye to this danger. Instead, they promote patriotism at the launch base, encouraging tourists to visit, completely ignoring public safety and well-being. From the hidden graveyards to toxic fuel and reckless propaganda, China's space program comes at enormous cost. In this rush of quick success, human life and dignity seems to count for very little. Yet despite these sacrifices, China still lags far behind the United States. Take low Earth orbit satellites, for example. The gap between China and the US is enormous. SpaceX Starlink satellites have already reached version 2.0, and they can launch 143 satellites in one go, with plans to deploy 42,000 in total. China's Chang'e plan, however, only aims for 1,296 satellites, and even on its first launch, the rocket ended up as debris. Then there's the cost. SpaceX has reduced the cost of launching each satellite $200,000, an amount that might not be even enough to purchase a luxury apartment in the US. In China, however, the cost per kilogram of satellite launch is $10,000, meaning each satellite launch costs $2 million, more than 10 times of the cost of SpaceX. While Starlink services isn't cheap, many rural Americans can still manage to afford it. But in China, even paying a few hundred yuan a month for satellite service is a struggle for most citizens, let alone an annual fee of 10,000 yuan. That's the cost of a few pigs to the Chinese farmers. So why does China continue to push for low Earth orbit satellites? The answer is simple. It's about trying to compete with the US in future unmanned warfare. Low Earth orbit satellites provide low latency, high bandwidth networks that will be essential for operating drones, unmanned ships, and even unmanned tanks. These satellites enable precise strikes and quick reactions. So despite the high costs and technical challenges, the CCP is determined to move forward. From rocket launches to satellite deployment and missile tests, each step is carried out under tremendous pressure. But the ongoing technical failures and mishaps expose deep issues in research and management. Despite the massive investments, results often fall short of expectations. In some cases, the failures are even laughable. This drive for militarization showcases China's ambition in defense, but it also exposes the fragility of its technical foundation and the weaknesses in its strategy. If China continues to rely on these underdeveloped technologies in warfare, the outcomes could be unpredictable. Ultimately, this rushed attempt to catch up technologically might only worsen China's position in the global military race. The so-called unmanned war has yet to arrive, but the real-world difficulties China faces are already too significant to overlook.